Kamos and Akhmos's hatred of the Hyksos was personal.
First trouble in Africa came from the Asians.
These are the people who enslaved our people. These people set up in an area of Kemet and Lower Kemet called Avaris, took over, and were enslaving the Africans for over 200 years until Second Enrei Tao of the 17th dynasty, and it is he who waged war on the battlefield, and his life was lost on the battlefield, and it was his son Thutmose who continued the battle until his son Thutmose, who opened up the 18th dynasty. This is a real person, brothers and sisters, who said never again. He was the liberator, the emancipator, who kicked these Hyksos out of our land. This is the real historical account that we've got to start teaching our people, brothers and sisters.
Here you see Second Enrei, 1574 BC, gave his life to free Kemet from the Hyksos, gave his life, and you see the damage that was done to his skull. He didn't give a damn. He didn't give a damn about the odds. He knew that the freedom of Kemet is not an option.
Their father tried to rebel against the invaders in the north. He paid a terrible price. 3,500 years later, his corpse still bears witness to his brutal slaughter at the hands of the enemy.
The face is grisly, partly because it wasn't well preserved, and there are many, many axe marks all over the head. It must have been Hyksos struggle, and it must have been fairly bloody.
Traditionally, Egyptians viewed foreigners as primitive and barbaric. For young Kamos, the death of his father at the hands of the Hyksos must have been humiliating as well as tragic. But now northern Egypt, and even the pyramids, stood on land governed by foreigners.
This was the worst thing to the mind of the Egyptian. The pyramid to Ahmose, to Amosi and Kamos was a kind of a reminder. Tell them we need the glory of Egypt to come back. And this gave them the power to unite, to defeat those strange people and dismiss them away from Egypt.
With his father dead, his land divided, Kamos was determined to defeat the Hyksos. His actual words have survived, carved on this large stone, a stela. Kamos bluntly states his intention to destroy the enemies to the north.
My aim is to liberate Egypt and crush the Asiatics.
But Kamos could not fight alone. He had to get his people behind him first. And as the stela records, most Thebans did not object to living in a divided Egypt. Akhmos, still only a young boy, watched from the sidelines as his brother Kamos prepared his army for the fight.
Kamose and his brother Ahmose would become the liberators, the freedom fighters. They would become the initiators of the greatest period of Egyptian history.
20-year-old Kamos set off leading his troops north into Hyksos territory. The Egyptian army now headed towards their ultimate goal, Avaris, the Hyksos capital. Kamos felt confident that victory is in his grasp.
He taunts the king of the Hyksos and shouts to him he's a coward, that he's no good, that he's going to vanquish him.
But Kamos would not sack Avaris. The records do not say what happened to him. But on the verge of expelling the Hyksos from Egypt, Kamos died. Egypt's hopes now rested on the shoulders of his 10-year-old brother, Akhmos. Although his mother had lost both her husband and eldest son to the Hyksos, she now groomed Akhmos to continue the war of liberation they had begun.
Ahmose would have been learning the ways of battle, and his mother and courtiers would have been training him to become a great military leader, and he had the example of Kamose to follow. So he's got to get it right. not only for his own case, but because the nation depends on it.
Ahmose swore to drive the Hyksos out of Egypt, but he lacked the means. The power of the pharaohs rested on a small bodyguard. During wartime, this skeleton army was reinforced with conscripts, who were dismissed as soon as the war ended. From his exile in Thebes, the pharaoh Ahmose began to build a new institution in Egypt, a standing army 1,000 strong and growing by the day. Young men were eager to join the army, both to expel the Hyksos and to escape poverty. Success in battle offered the chance of reward. In his new life as a soldier, Ahmose learned the first rule of the military: obedience. He was issued a uniform, short linen kilt and light leather shield, and his hair was shorn to mark him as a soldier and forge a bond with his comrades. In the deserts around Thebes, out of sight of the Hyksos spies who plied the Nile, Ahmose was trained to exhaustion. Braced for a long campaign against an unbeaten adversary, the pharaoh Ahmose gathered his forces at Thebes. He aimed to attack the Hyksos in Avaris, their capital in the Nile Delta. Reaching the marshy delta near the Mediterranean, Ahmose and his comrades disembarked and marched upon the Hyksos strongholds around Avaris. As the Egyptian warriors assembled for battle,
After 10 years of preparation, Ahmose was ready to take on the Hyksos. It would be his greatest test. The consequences would determine the rest of Egyptian history. Ahmose returned victorious to Thebes. He presented his ceremonial axe to his mother as a symbol of his great victory. The work his father and brother had begun, he had finally completed.
He actually dismissed the Hyksos. His father and grandfather and his brother did start, but he's the one that he actually succeeded to expel the Hyksos away from Egypt.
Ahmose was no longer merely the king of Thebes. He was now pharaoh of a united Egypt.
The reunification of Egypt is crucial. It means a new beginning. It means that Egypt is back to where it should be, as a unified land under the rule of one king, one pharaoh.
It's a seminal moment. It's a beginning moment. There is sometime around maybe 1520 is the opening act in the new kingdom.
The Egyptians were so in awe of Ahmose's victory over the Hyksos that the pharaoh himself was worshipped as a god.
Ahmose, he was a hero. In the eyes of everyone, they were smiling, calling his name, building a chapel for him, asking God to protect him because he's God.
And then when our brothers come up out of the south, got strength to kick their ass out, then it said, then there was a pharaoh that knew not Joseph. They don't tell you the whole story though. They don't want to tell you. And this is a Christian publication. So if you get mad at them.
Now right here on these temples here, now you can see documented where we tied them up, roped them, and forced them out of our land. These are the people that we've always had problems with. The problem is we don't understand a historical war. It's a historical war with these people. It's an ancient historical war from the time we've had contact with them.
From the south, every time North Africa is in trouble, a king comes from southern Africa to rescue. Moses came up, kicked out the foreigners, and brought the Seti kings to power And from the cities would come the mighty 18th dynasty. Now that the foreigners are gone, the Africans looked around and saw the friends of the foreigners. So what you still doing here? Now, but the African in his customary generosity said that those of you who wish to obey African law may stay, though you betrayed me. Those who do not wish to obey African law will have to go. Those who decided they weren't going to obey African law left. Those who decided they would obey stayed. There was a 16-mile land bridge connecting Africa with Western Asia. So nobody had to leave by sea.
What makes you think that a people have to leave Africa by the sea, pardon to let them out, when there was a 16-mile land bridge, they walked in, why can't they walk out? You need a dramatic, somebody needed a dramatic story to dramatize the myth of their slavery in Africa. When they were actually guests in Africa's home, Africa saved them from hunger. And when they associated themselves with the conquerors of Africa, the Africans said, now you got to go. Now they're going to dramatize it, say they were slaves in Egypt. And anytime anybody said he was slaves in Egypt, ask them what period and under what administration. The period when they were supposed to be slaves was the period when Egypt was conquered from the Western Asia. If they were slaves at all, then I doubt this. They were slaves under foreign domination, and we are not to blame. People can accuse you of having them enslaved with one breath and say the Egyptians were white in the next breath. Now come on, get your lie together.